I was exhausted when I finally rolled my suitcase across the marble floor of the hotel lobby. My shoulders ached from the flight, my legs were stiff from sitting for too long, and all I wanted was a hot shower, maybe a glass of wine, and a bed big enough to swallow me whole. Business trips always had this way of draining me, and this one had been particularly relentless. Back-to-back meetings, endless small talk, and the constant buzz of emails that refused to leave me alone. The hotel was chic, the kind that smelled faintly of lilies and polished wood, with a front desk that gleamed under warm lighting. I waited behind a couple checking in, their laughter and hand-holding only reminding me how utterly alone I felt. By the time I reached the counter, I was ready to get the process over with. "Reservation under Linda Hayes," I murmured, sliding my ID across. The receptionist typed briskly, smiled, and handed me a sleek key card. "Room 1208, Ms. Hayes. Elevator is just to your right. Enjoy your stay." I thanked her, not even glancing at the card as I tucked it between my fingers and trudged toward the elevator. My heels clicked softly against the floor, echoing in the near-empty lobby, and the elevator whisked me up with a quiet hum. When the door slid open, I found myself on a hushed corridor, dimly lit, lined with identical polished doors. I followed the numbers until I reached 1208, my suitcase trailing noisily behind me. With a weary sigh, I slid the card into the slot and waited for the little green light. The lock clicked open, and relief washed over me. The room was dark when I stepped inside. A faint scent lingered in the air, warm, masculine, expensive. It wasn't what I expected, but I chalked it up to the hotel's air fresheners. I closed the door behind me, slipped off my heels, and pushed my suitcase toward the corner. My fingers grazed along the wall until they found the light switch, but just as I flicked it on, I froze. There was movement. At first, I thought it was my imagination, jet lag playing tricks on me. But then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of someone shifting on the bed. My breath caught in my throat. My heart pounded against my ribs as I turned my head. And there he was. A man sat up slowly in the bed, his broad shoulders illuminated by the soft glow of the lamp he'd just reached to switch on. His hair was tousled, his jaw shadowed with dark stubble, and his eyes, God, those eyes, were fixed directly on me. Surprise flickered across his face, followed quickly by curiosity. For a split second, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt charged, heavy with tension, the kind of tension that made my pulse race for reasons I didn't fully understand yet. "You're not room service," he said finally, his voice low, deep, edged with amusement. I stammered, my cheeks burning. I think there's been a mistake. I was given this key at the front desk. This is supposed to be my room." He tilted his head, lips quirking in a half-smile that made my stomach flip. "Funny, because this is supposed to be mine?" Embarrassment flooded through me, but beneath it, a strange thrill hummed in my veins. I should have bolted right then, apologized, and marched straight back down to the lobby. But my feet didn't move. Instead, I stood there, my fingers tightening around the handle of my suitcase, staring at this stranger who looked far too comfortable in the bed that I'd been dreaming of for hours. His chest was bare, lightly toned, with the sheets pooled low around his waist. I'm so sorry," I managed, my voice soft. "I must have been given the wrong key." He chuckled lightly, not at all irritated. In fact, he looked intrigued. No harm done. Though I have to say, I don't usually get beautiful women walking into my hotel room uninvited. Makes for a nice surprise. Heat rushed to my face again, and I glanced toward the door, fumbling for the card key. But something in his gaze stopped me. There was no malice, no annoyance, only a spark of something playful, something dangerous. I swallowed hard, suddenly hyper-aware of how quiet the room was, of how alone we were. He leaned back against the pillows, still watching me with that teasing glint. "What's your name?" My voice barely came out. "Linda." "Linda," he repeated, as though testing the way it felt on his tongue. "Well, Linda, maybe fate wanted you here, instead of wherever you were supposed to end up." I should have laughed it off. I should have insisted I leave. Instead, I found myself lingering, curiosity sparking despite the voice in my head telling me to walk away. And when he smiled again, slow, confident, the kind of smile that pulled me in, I knew this wasn't going to be a simple mix-up I'd forget in the morning. This was the start of something else entirely. For a long moment, I didn't move. The sensible part of me screamed to back out of the room, return to the lobby, and sort the mix-up. But there was another part, warmer, reckless, that wanted to stay. Something about him pulled me in, as though the universe had slipped the wrong key into my hand on purpose. He patted the edge of the bed casually, his eyes still fixed on me. You look like you've had a long day.
Sit.
I promise I don't bite. I let out a breathy laugh, shaking my head. This is insane. I'm in the wrong room. And yet, his smile deepened, that teasing glint in his eyes never wavering. You haven't left yet. I bit my lip, caught. He wasn't wrong. Against my better judgment, I let go of my suitcase and stepped further into the room. My heels dangled from my fingers as I moved closer, the plush carpet soft under my aching feet. You really shouldn't make jokes like that, I murmured, trying to sound stern, though my voice betrayed me with its softness. Why not? He asked, tilting his head. His dark hair fell slightly across his forehead, and he brushed it back lazily. You look like you could use a laugh. Or maybe something stronger. He reached for the nightstand and held up a half-filled bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. My throat felt dry, the day's exhaustion catching up with me. Tempting, I admitted. Then say yes, he said simply. His confidence wasn't arrogant. It was warm, magnetic, impossible to ignore. I hesitated for only a second before I perched on the armchair near the bed, keeping what I thought was a safe distance. He poured the whiskey, slid 1 glass toward me, and lifted his own. To fate, he said smoothly, raising his glass. I rolled my eyes but couldn't hide my smile. To hotel clerks who can't read properly. Our glasses clinked, and the amber liquid burned deliciously down my throat, loosening the tight coil of nerves in my stomach. The room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. Still, the silence didn't feel awkward. It felt charged. Every time I glanced at him, I caught him already watching me, his gaze steady, intense. So, Linda, he said, leaning back against the headboard as if he owned the world. What brings you here? Besides mistaken key cards. Work, I replied, twirling the glass between my fingers. Meetings, presentations, endless hours in conference rooms. Not exactly glamorous. He smirked. You don't strike me as the boring corporate type. And what type do I strike you as? I asked before I could stop myself. He studied me for a moment, his eyes lingering, tracing over my hair, my shoulders, the way I curled my legs slightly in the chair. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost intimate. The type who pretends to follow all the rules until someone hands her the wrong key. A shiver ran down my spine. I tried to cover it with a laugh. You're awfully sure of yourself. I'm sure of what I see. His eyes held mine, unflinching, until I had to glance away, my pulse quickening. I took another sip of whiskey, the warmth spreading through me, and shifted in my seat. I really should be leaving, before someone accuses me of breaking and entering. He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. Do you want to leave? The question hung heavy in the air.
Simple. Direct.
Dangerous. I opened my mouth, but the truth tangled on my tongue. Did I? Everything logical screamed yes. But my body, my heartbeats, my breath, they all whispered no. My voice faltered. His gaze didn't waver. I don't know. He smiled then, slow and devastating. That's good enough for me. I set my glass down, suddenly needing something to do with my hands. But before I could move, he stood and crossed the small space between us. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, tall, broad, his presence filling the room. He stopped just in front of me, his eyes searching mine, waiting. He didn't touch me, not yet, but the heat radiating off him was almost unbearable. You're nervous, he said softly. I swallowed hard. Of course I am. This isn't normal. Normal is overrated. His voice was husky, his words brushing over me like a caress. My fingers curled into the fabric of the chair, fighting the urge to reach out. He leaned down just slightly, his face inches from mine, close enough that I could see the faint line of a scar at his temple, the curve of his lips, the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "I won't touch you unless you want me to," he murmured. My breath caught. The restraint in his voice made the tension coil even tighter inside me. I wanted to laugh, to deflect, to step back into safety, but I couldn't.
I didn't want to.
Instead, I whispered, "And if I do?" His lips curved, not quite a smile, more like a promise. "Then you'll find out what happens when the wrong key unlocks the right door." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken words, with anticipation that thrummed between us. And for the first time that night, I realized I wasn't tired anymore. I was wide awake, my pulse hammering, my body alive in ways I hadn't felt in years. His words hung between us like a challenge, daring me to admit what I wanted. My pulse thundered in my ears, my breath shallow, and for once in my life, I stopped thinking. I simply moved. I reached up, my fingers brushing against his wrist. That tiny touch broke the last thread of restraint. His lips crashed onto mine, hot and demanding, and the spark that had been building since I walked into the room ignited into a wildfire. The kiss was everything. Hungry, breathless, desperate. I melted into it, into him, my hands sliding up his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin under my palms. He tasted of whiskey and temptation, his tongue teasing mine until I moaned softly into his mouth. He pulled me up from the chair with surprising gentleness, his hands strong but careful on my waist. The kiss never broke as he backed me toward the bed, our bodies pressed together, heat rising between us like a storm that couldn't be contained. When the backs of my knees hit the mattress, he eased me down, his weight hovering above mine, every movement slow and deliberate, as if savoring each second. His mouth trailed along my jaw, down my neck, leaving a path of fire that made my toes curl. "Tell me you want this," he murmured against my skin, his breath hot, his voice rough with need. "I do," I whispered, and I had never meant anything more. That was all he needed. Clothes disappeared between hurried kisses and lingering touches, each piece tossed aside as if it no longer mattered. What mattered was the way his body fit against mine, the way every nerve in me lit up under his hands. The hotel room felt suspended in time, nothing existing beyond us. His lips explored me with reverence, with hunger, with a patience that made me gasp and ache all at once. My fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, urging him deeper into the storm we'd created. When he finally moved inside me, it was slow, almost agonizing, as though he wanted me to feel every inch, every moment. Our eyes locked, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just us, two strangers bound by a mistake that didn't feel like a mistake at all. The rhythm built, faster, hotter, bodies moving together in perfect sync. I clung to him, nails digging into his back, breath coming in broken gasps. Each thrust unraveled me, pulling me closer to the edge until I shattered beneath him, my cry muffled against his lips as pleasure surged through me like a wave. He followed, his body trembling against mine, his groan low and raw as he found his own release. For a long moment, neither of us moved, our bodies tangled, our hearts racing in unison. When he finally rolled beside me, pulling me into his arms, the silence was different.
Softer.
Comfortable. I lay there, my cheek pressed against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. My body was still buzzing, my mind spinning, but underneath it all was a strange, calm certainty. This wasn't supposed to happen, I whispered into the quiet. "No," he agreed, brushing a strand of hair from my face. His touch was tender, almost protective. But sometimes the best things aren't supposed to. I smiled faintly, tracing a finger along his arm. I had come here expecting nothing more than exhaustion, an empty hotel bed, and another forgettable night on the road. Instead, fate, or a simple mistake, had handed me something unforgettable. As sleep finally began to pull me under, I thought about the wrong key, the wrong room, the wrong man. And how somehow, impossibly, it had all felt so right.
Sparkles the end.